I stood there in my navy suit at my stepdaughter's wedding, and she turned to her friends with this bright, perfect smile and said, "Oh, that's just Marcus. He's nobody really. Funny how I still remember his name though, right?" She laughed. Her friends laughed. And something inside me just cracked. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. The groom's father, Richard Calloway, he saw me standing there and his face went completely white. His mouth opened like he was about to say something, and then the words just died. They died right there in his throat like they hit a wall they couldn't climb over. For a second, and I mean just one horrible second, the entire reception hall felt too bright and too quiet all at the same time. The DJ was doing a sound check, and the microphone squealed, this thin, sharp sound that cut through the air like it was embarrassed for me. Somebody's fork clinked against their glass. Somebody else cleared their throat, that awkward kind of throat clearing that means they saw what happened and they don't know where to look. Mia, that's my stepdaughter, she just stood there in her white dress, glowing like every bride should glow. Her hair was pinned up perfectly, her makeup was flawless, and her cheeks were already flushed from all the hugging and the posing and being the absolute center of everything. She looked right at me when she said it, too. Not past me, not around me, straight at me. "He's nobody. Funny how I still remember his name." I didn't flinch. You know, I spent 23 years working fraud cases at a credit union, and if there's one thing I learned, it's how to keep your face completely still while everything inside your chest is rattling around like loose change in a dryer. But oh, I felt it. I felt it like someone reached inside and twisted something that was never meant to be touched. Mia turned away immediately, like I'd already done my job just by standing there and taking it. "And this," she announced, her voice going up with pride, "is my real dad, Thomas Pierce. He just got here." Thomas was standing near the entrance with a little gift bag, dressed like any other late guest. Same dark suit as half the men in the room, same shiny shoes. But the way he wore that suit, it was like the fabric was there to applaud him, you know? He leaned in for pictures like he'd been rehearsing in front of a mirror for weeks. When he hugged Mia, he patted her back just a little too long, then he looked around, scanning faces, soaking up attention that wasn't even really his yet. He didn't look like a villain. Not at all. He looked like someone you'd meet on a Sunday afternoon flight, making small talk in the boarding line. Airport cologne and confidence. I've met his type 1,000 times. You don't smell danger on men like that. You smell aftershave. My wife, Lauren, she stood beside Mia with her hands clasped so tight in front of her, the way she always does when she wants something, anything, to just go smoothly. She gave me this look, this pleading look that said, "Please, Marcus. Not tonight. Not here." So I did what I've always done. I swallowed it. I forced this small, tight smile onto my face. I nodded like Mia hadn't just cut my legs out from under me in front of 80 people. I'd promised myself I wouldn't be that guy who makes a scene at a wedding. I promised myself I'd keep my dignity even if nobody else was going to hand it to me on a silver platter. But then Richard Calloway, he saw me. Really saw me. Richard was the groom's father. 64 years old, broad shoulders, silver hair combed back perfectly, that dealership owner posture, you know the kind. The type of man who still shakes hands like it actually matters. He'd been laughing with a group of people near the bar, holding a plastic flute of champagne like it was just a prop in his hand. Then his eyes landed on me and his whole body went rigid. His mouth opened. "Oh my God, he's... He stopped. Just stopped cold. His face drained of color in a way that didn't fit with the music and the flowers and the big welcome sign by the door. He stared at me like he'd just walked into the wrong room entirely. Thomas saw it too. I watched Thomas's smile falter for the first time all night. Richard's wife touched his arm gently. "Richard!" He blinked like someone had slapped him awake. His eyes flicked between me, then Thomas, then back to me. He took one step forward, then caught himself, like he suddenly remembered where he was. A wedding. A room absolutely full of witnesses. And whatever name he'd been about to say, it wasn't meant for this moment. I stood there in my navy suit, the one I'd kept pressed in a garment bag at the Manor Inn, trying so hard not to let my hands shake. The suit fit a little tight now. I'd bought it years ago, back when Lauren still looked at me like I belonged in the family photos instead of hovering at the edge of them. The venue, Riverside Terrace, was exactly what you'd expect just outside Kansas City. Fake wood beams across the ceiling, big windows with string lights draped everywhere. Deli trays on the back tables. A Costco sheet cake sitting in a box as backup because the real cake made everyone too nervous to actually eat. The smell of coffee and hairspray and warm chicken filled the air. Real American life. Real Midwestern smiles. And me, standing there like an extra in someone else's movie. Mia's friends, mostly in their 20s, they laughed. Not loud, not cruel exactly. Just easy. Like the joke was safe because the target was older, quiet, already labeled. One of Lauren's aunts gave me this tight look, sympathy mixed with discomfort, like she didn't want to get involved but felt bad about it. A couple of older guys at a nearby table looked down at their drinks real fast. The room just moved on. Because that's what rooms do, right? I wanted to move on too. I wanted so badly to focus on the good parts. Jacob looked happy. Mia looked happy. Lauren was breathing. The night could still be peaceful if I just stayed small enough. But Richard Calloway kept staring at me like his brain was desperately trying to solve a problem right in front of his face. Because what happened next would change everything. And Richard Calloway wasn't about to let it slide. I pretended I didn't notice Richard staring and walked toward my seat, trying to blend into the background like I always do. The place cards were all lined up near the entrance, these little white cards with gold script. My name was there, Marcus Donnelly. No. Dad? No. Stepdad. Just my name, like I was a neighbor invited out of politeness. At my table, a man about my age leaned over and murmured quietly, "You all right?" I nodded. Fine. It was the kind of lie I'd perfected over decades. The kind that keeps things from spiraling into something worse. The DJ started playing this slow country song, something from the 90s, the kind older guests could hum along to without even thinking. Chairs scraped against the floor. The wedding coordinator hustled past with her clipboard. Someone called out for more ice. I looked toward Lauren. She was laughing at something Mia said, but her laugh sounded too high, too forced. Her shoulders were tight as guitar strings. She kept glancing my way like she was checking the temperature in the room, making sure I wasn't about to explode. Thomas drifted closer to Lauren, putting himself right in her space like he'd always belonged there. I saw him lean in, say something low that I couldn't hear. Lauren's face pinched tight, then she smoothed it out real quick. She nodded. And that's when it hit me, slow and heavy like a weight sinking in water. Thomas didn't come back for Mia. He came back because he needed something. That's how it always works with men like him. They show up when there's something to collect. Richard Calloway moved across the room then, weaving between tables with purpose. He didn't head for the bar. He didn't head for the dance floor. He headed straight toward the side hallway, the one where the restrooms were, where the staff entrance was, where people went when they needed to have a quiet word away from prying eyes. He stopped just short of me, close enough that nobody watching would think we were having a conversation. "Marcus," he said, his voice low and tight. I looked up. "Mr. Calloway." His eyes darted around quick and nervous. "Did you know he'd be here?" He, meaning Thomas. I kept my voice steady. "I didn't. He arrived just like everyone else." Richard's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitch. "I need a minute with you." Before I could answer, Lauren came toward us fast, that smile pasted on her face like wallpaper. She grabbed my arm lightly, like a wife should, like this was all perfectly normal. "Marcus," she said, still smiling but her voice strained. "Can you come with me for just a second?" Her fingers pressed a little too hard through my sleeve. Thomas was right behind her now. The gift bag was gone from his hands. His eyes were bright, too bright. "Hey, buddy," he said. The word buddy landed wrong. Too casual, too familiar, like he was trying on a role he hadn't earned and didn't fit. Lauren's smile wavered just slightly. "It's just a quick family thing." Richard Calloway stood there frozen mid-step, watching the three of us like he could see the whole terrible end of the night playing out in his head. Thomas tilted his head toward that side hallway. "Won't take long, Marcus." And in that moment, standing there under those string lights and fake wood beams with that country song playing too softly in the background, I felt something colder than humiliation settle deep in my stomach. Because I knew that hallway wasn't about family. It was about paper. And somehow, someway, they believed I'd actually sign. Engagement break. Have you ever been put in a position where you knew something was wrong but everyone expected you to just go along with it? Drop a comment and let me know. I followed Lauren and Thomas down that side hallway because, well, that's what I've always done. When things get uncomfortable, I move instead of arguing. I keep the peace. The hallway smelled like cleaning spray and old carpet. There was a folding table leaned against the wall with extra programs stacked in these crooked piles. Somewhere behind a closed door, a toilet flushed. The sounds of the wedding felt far away now, muffled. Thomas walked like he owned the place, like every hallway in every building was built just for him. Lauren walked like she was trying not to trip over her own feet. "Marcus," she said, her voice dropping low, "this isn't what it looks like." "That's usually when it's exactly what it looks like," I said. Thomas chuckled, this easy, comfortable sound. "Still got that sense of humor, huh? Man, it's been a long time." I didn't answer. I just watched his hands. Men tell you more with their hands than they ever do with their mouths. We stopped near the staff exit. The music from the ballroom was so muffled here it felt like the party was happening in a completely different building. Lauren reached into her purse and pulled out this thin folder. Cream-colored. "Neat. Too neat. We just need your help with something," she said carefully. "It's nothing big, Marcus." Thomas nodded along like a puppet on strings. "Purely temporary. Just logistics. Wedding stuff, you know how it is." I took the folder from her and opened it. Power of attorney. Limited. They'd labeled it in bold letters, the kind of letters meant to calm people down, make them feel safe. But beneath that? Language that wasn't limited at all. Authority over accounts. Authorization to open credit lines. A guarantee tied to something called a short-term bridge loan. There was a blank line for my signature, and a notary block already filled out. Everything except the stamp. I looked up at Lauren. "You brought this to a wedding." Her eyes darted away from mine. "We didn't know when else we'd all be together." Thomas smiled, soft and patient like a concerned parent. "Look, Marcus, I know paperwork isn't fun, but Mia and Jacob are trying to get started in life. Houses aren't cheap anymore. This just helps them qualify, that's all. By putting my name on it," I said flatly. "Just for a bit," Thomas said smoothly. "You've always been good with money, Marcus." That stung more than I expected. Because it was true. And because he was using it like a weapon. I scanned the page again. Years of reading fine print kicked in automatically, like muscle memory. My eyes slid past all those friendly little headings and landed on the real teeth of the document. Broad language. No sunset clause. Nothing stopping someone from moving fast and leaving me holding the bag while they disappeared. Lauren stepped closer to me. "Please don't make this a thing." "Not tonight, Marcus." I thought about Mia at 12 years old, crying in the passenger seat after a fender bender. Thought about the check I wrote for her braces without saying a single word about it. Thought about that old shoebox in my closet, taped shut, filled with receipts nobody ever asked to see. My chest felt tight. My hand hovered over the pen Thomas slid toward me across the wall ledge. I almost signed. Then I noticed the address. It was an old one. Thomas's address. The same exact address that had popped up years ago on a fraud report I'd handled, tied to a shell company that vanished overnight. He'd never been charged. Men like him rarely are. But the paper remembered. I closed the folder slowly. I need a minute, I said. Thomas's smile stiffened at the edges. Marcus, I said, a minute. I stepped back, pulled out my phone, and dialed the after-hours fraud line at the credit union. It rang once. Twice. Went straight to voicemail. Bad reception. Or bad timing. Or both. Lauren's voice cracked like thin ice. Why are you doing this? Because this isn't help, I said quietly. It's pressure. A knock echoed down the hallway. A venue staffer poked her head out from around the corner. Mr. Donnelly? Mr. Calloway asked for you. They're about to start the father-son dance. I looked past her, down the hall toward those ballroom lights spilling out into the corridor. Richard Calloway was pulling the emergency brake. And whatever happened next was about to be very, very public. Richard Calloway didn't wait for me to answer the venue staffer. He stepped into a hallway himself, his tall frame filling up that narrow space, jaw set like he'd already made his decision, and was just waiting to see if I was going to fight him on it. Marcus, he said quietly, firmly. I didn't know you'd be here tonight. Lauren stiffened beside me. Thomas's smile thinned to almost nothing. I nodded once. Neither did I, really. Richard's eyes flicked down to the folder still in my hand, then over to Thomas. He didn't bother lowering his voice. Didn't try to be polite about it. That's interesting, he said slowly. Because if Thomas Pierce is involved in anything financial around my son, this wedding stops right now. Thomas let out this laugh, but it came just a beat too late, too forced. Whoa, Richard. Easy there, man. This is just family stuff. Richard turned on him, and his voice went cold as winter. You don't get to say that word like it means something. The hallway felt smaller suddenly. The music from the ballroom drifted in, slow and sentimental and completely wrong for this moment. Richard looked back at me. You still working fraud, Marcus? Semi-retired, I said. I consult now. Richard nodded like that answered some question he'd been carrying around for years. Figures. Lauren looked between us, confusion spreading across her face. What is going on? Richard took a breath, the kind you take before you say something important. Years ago, Marcus helped keep my dealership from going under. Quietly. Didn't ask for a thing. If he hadn't caught what he caught, I'd have been answering questions I didn't have good answers for. Thomas scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. Come on, Richard. That was ages ago. Different situation entirely. Richard's eyes went ice cold. Same pattern. Thomas's jaw tightened. He glanced at Lauren, searching for support. This is getting blown way out of proportion. I finally spoke up. Then you won't mind explaining why you need my signature. Silence dropped like a stone. Richard leaned closer to Thomas. What did you ask him to sign? Thomas hesitated. Just a flicker, just for a second. But it was enough. A temporary authorization, he said. For the kids. To help them get started. Richard turned to me and held out his hand. May I? I handed him the folder. He read fast, faster than most people his age, eyes scanning every line. He didn't miss the notary block. Didn't miss the broad language hidden in all those friendly words. His face darkened like storm clouds rolling in. You brought this here, he said, his voice barely controlled. To a wedding. Lauren's voice came out small and thin. It was just to help them get approved for. Approved for what? Richard interrupted. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. Nothing came out. Richard exhaled hard through his nose. My son hasn't applied for anything. That landed like a punch. Thomas took a step backward. Richard, listen. No, Richard said firmly. You listen. I've been getting calls all week. Investment opportunities. Short-term financing deals. I thought it was just noise, just spam. Now I see it's you. The truth slid into place in my head then, clean and sharp as a knife. Thomas wasn't here for Mia. He wasn't even here for me. He was here because he thought my name, quiet, boring, trustworthy Marcus Donnelly, could unlock doors for him. Doors to money he had no right to touch. Richard looked at me again, concern in his eyes. You all right, Marcus? I nodded, even though my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I almost signed it. Lauren gasped. Marcus. I didn't, I said. But I almost did. Richard straightened up to his full height. That's enough for me. He turned toward the ballroom. We're handling this now. Thomas grabbed his arm. You can't do this here, Richard. Richard shook him off without effort. Watch me. As Richard walked away down that hallway, Lauren sank back against the wall like her legs had finally given out completely. I didn't know, she whispered, more to herself than to me. I didn't know. I looked at her, really looked at her. You knew enough to bring papers, Lauren. She didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Thomas stared at me now, and all that charm, all that smooth confidence, it was just gone. His eyes were hard. You think you want something here? He said. I met his gaze and held it. I think you misjudged who you were standing next to. Engagement break. Have you ever had someone underestimate you just because you were quiet? Let me know in the comments. The music cut out mid-chorus. That alone was enough to make every head in that reception hall turn. Richard Calloway stood at the edge of the dance floor now, one hand wrapped around the microphone like he'd done this 1,000 times before. Which, I realized, he probably had. Dealership openings. Charity dinners. Rotary Club banquets. The man knew how to speak when people were holding forks. Sorry, folks, he said, his voice calm and steady. Just need a quick word before we get started again. The room went quiet. Chairs stopped scraping. Phones dipped lower as curiosity replaced distraction. I was still in the hallway, close enough to hear every single word, far enough to feel like I was watching my own life through glass. Lauren looked at me, her eyes wet and desperate. Please, she whispered. Don't let this get ugly. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My chest felt packed so tight, like someone had filled it with concrete. Richard continued. Tonight's about family. And sometimes family means making sure people don't get hurt. Financially, legally, or otherwise. I saw Thomas stiffen. He took half a step toward the ballroom, then stopped himself. Too many eyes now. Too many witnesses. There's a man here tonight, Richard said, who doesn't like attention. A man who spent most of his life doing things quietly and correctly. A few heads started turning, looking around. I felt it before I saw it. That slow pivot of attention. Richard lifted his chin. Marcus Donnelly. The room shifted. I stepped forward without even thinking. My legs moved before my brain caught up. I stopped just inside the ballroom doorway, under that warm wash of lights, feeling suddenly very old and very, very visible. Richard looked right at me. Marcus, would you mind standing with me for a moment? Every instinct I had screamed at me to stay small, sit down, don't make waves, just disappear like always. But something else, something older and steadier, pushed me forward. I stood beside him. What Richard said next would change everything. And there was no going back. Richard faced the room again, his voice strong and clear. Years ago, Marcus helped uncover a financing scheme that would have cost a lot of families in this town a lot of money. He didn't do it for credit. He didn't do it for recognition. He did it because it was right. A murmur rippled through the guests. Not loud. Just curious. Confused. Richard glanced sideways at me, then back to the crowd. And tonight, he continued, he was asked to sign paperwork. Here. At this wedding. Paperwork that could have put him on the hook for things he didn't agree to. Behind me, I heard Lauren let out this soft sound, almost like a whimper. Mia was staring now, her mouth slightly open, the color draining from her face like someone had pulled a plug. Richard held up the cream-colored folder. This doesn't belong at a celebration. The room went completely still. Thomas stepped forward from the hallway, hands raised like he was trying to calm a wild animal. This is being misunderstood. he said, his voice smooth but strained. It was a private family matter. Richard turned slowly to face him. Then why was there a notary block already filled out? That did it. A few gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Oh no." Mia's eyes snapped to Thomas. Dad? Thomas smiled, but it looked strained now, stretched too thin. Honey, it's not. Richard cut him off. I've already called my bank's compliance officer. And venue security. Just to be safe. Two men in dark jackets appeared near the entrance then. Polite. Professional. But unmistakable. Thomas's shoulders slumped. The confidence just drained out of him like air from a punctured tire. Mia took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked at me then, really looked at me, for the first time all night. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The security guards didn't grab Thomas. They didn't raise their voices or put hands on him. They just stood close enough that everyone in that room understood exactly what was happening. Sir, one of them said quietly, politely. We need to step outside for a moment. Thomas looked around, searching desperately for an ally, for someone to back him up. Lauren wouldn't meet his eyes. Mia stood frozen, both hands clenched in front of her dress like she was physically holding herself together. This is ridiculous, Thomas said, trying for a laugh that wouldn't come. I flew all this way for my daughter's wedding. Richard didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You're not being accused of anything, he said calmly. Not yet. But you're not signing anything here. And you're not pressuring anyone in my son's family. Thomas turned to me then. For the first time all night, the charm was completely gone. You could have handled this privately, he said, and there was an edge to his voice now. I met his eyes. I tried. That was the truth. Simple. Clear. And it carried more weight than anything else I could have said. Thomas hesitated, then nodded once, sharp and angry, like he was making some kind of mental note. He followed the security guards toward the exit. As he passed Mia, he reached out like he might touch her shoulder, comfort her somehow. Then he thought better of it. The doors closed behind him. No applause. No cheering. Just this thick, stunned silence that filled the whole room. Richard set the microphone down carefully, like it was something fragile that might break. Thank you for your patience, he said to everyone. Let's all take a breath. The DJ hovered nearby, unsure what to do. Richard gave him a small nod. Music's fine. That country song came back on, softer than before. People started moving again. Slowly. Carefully. Like they were walking on thin ice. Mia turned toward me. I'd imagined this moment 100 times over the years. Not like this, never like this, but still. I'd imagined her finally seeing me. Finally acknowledging me. Her face crumpled like paper. I didn't know, she said, her voice barely holding together. I swear to you, Marcus, I didn't know. I believed she hadn't known everything. But I also knew she'd known enough. You knew I wasn't nobody, I said gently. You just decided it was easier to say it out loud. She flinched like I'd physically struck her. Tears spilled down her face fast, ruining that careful makeup. One of her bridesmaids rushed over then, whispering to her, pulling her aside. Lauren stood there looking smaller than I'd ever seen her in my entire life. I thought I was helping, she said quietly. I nodded. I know. And I meant it. That was the hardest part. Engagement break, tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Richard approached me again, lowering his voice so only I could hear. You okay? Yeah, I said. I will be. He hesitated. I'm sorry this happened in front of everyone. I glanced around the room. At the guests pretending not to stare. At the half-eaten plates of food. At the wedding cake nobody wanted to touch now. It was always going to happen in front of someone, I said. Tonight just happened to have witnesses. Richard gave me this grim smile. If you ever need anything. I know, I said. Thank you, Richard. But I couldn't stay. Not anymore. There was nothing left for me there. I didn't stay much longer. There was nothing left for me in that reception hall. Nothing that felt right anymore. I slipped out quietly, the way I always have, through a side door near the coat check. Only this time, it didn't feel like disappearing. It felt like choosing. Outside, the night air was cool and clean, washing over me like relief. I sat in my truck for a minute with the engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel, just letting my heartbeat slow down to something close to normal. Then I drove. I stopped at this little 24-hour diner off the highway. You know the kind. Vinyl booths. Burnt coffee. A waitress who called me Han, without a trace of irony. I ordered eggs I didn't really want and drank coffee I probably shouldn't have had. For the first time all night, my hands were finally steady. The diner was quiet in that late-night way. 2 other tables occupied. A couple of truckers with baseball caps pulled low. A woman in scrubs stirring her coffee like she was trying to stay awake for the drive home. The neon open sign buzzed softly in the window. The air smelled like bacon grease and floor cleaner, and something else. Something like safety. I slid into a booth near the back. My suit jacket was still on, tie loosened. My phone sat on the table beside the sugar packet holder like it belonged there. The waitress, maybe in her 50s, looked at me for half a second and her expression softened. She'd seen men walk in with that same hollow look before. Coffee? She asked. Yes, ma'am, I said. She poured it without rushing, like she wasn't trying to get rid of me. You coming from an event? A wedding, I said. She nodded knowingly. Those will do it to you. I almost laughed. Instead, I just stared down into my cup. The coffee was too hot at first, then suddenly not hot enough. That's how the whole night felt. My eggs arrived. I took 2 bites. Tasted nothing. I kept thinking about Mia's face when the room turned on her. Real dad. How fast that pride became panic. How quickly a person can realize they built their whole identity on the wrong story. I didn't feel triumph. Not the way people imagine revenge feels. There weren't any fireworks in my chest. No big gotcha moment where I felt 10 feet tall. What I felt was tired. Deep, bone-level tired. The kind you get after holding your breath for years. I'd spent such a long time being careful. Careful not to push too hard. Careful not to complain. Careful not to look like the stereotype, you know? The stepdad who wants credit. The older husband who can't handle his wife's adult daughter. I was careful because I loved Lauren. Because I wanted peace. Because I thought if I just stayed steady enough, the family would eventually settle around me like a board finally nailed down properly. But families don't settle around you just because you're sturdy. Sometimes they lean on you because you're sturdy. Sometimes they lean until something cracks. My phone buzzed then. Lauren's name lit up the screen. I stared at it. My thumb hovered. I let it ring twice before I answered. Hello? Her voice came out small and raw. Where are you? At a diner, I said. Off the highway. Silence on her end. Then, Are you okay? I exhaled slowly. I'm breathing. She made this sound. Half laugh, half sob. Marcus, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it was like that. I believe you, I said, and I meant it. But you knew it was something. You knew enough to bring papers. I was scared, she whispered. Mia said Thomas had a plan. She said Richard had connections and that this would all work out. That it was just a bridge loan, just for a few months. She said you'd understand because you're good at this. I stared at the diner napkin in front of me, tracing the edge of it with my finger. Being good at it is exactly why I didn't sign. Her breathing hitched. I feel sick. Yeah, I said quietly. So do I. More silence. I could hear faint noise behind her. Voices. Maybe the wedding still stumbling forward somehow. The DJ trying desperately to patch joy back onto the night. Then Lauren said, Mia keeps asking for you. I didn't answer right away. I thought of that moment earlier. Mia's voice, bright and cutting. That laugh when she called me nobody. I thought of the way she'd done it with an audience, like she needed the room to agree with her. Finally I said, "Tell her I'm safe." Lauren whispered, "Marcus, are you coming home tonight?" I looked out the window at the dark highway, at the occasional headlights sliding by like ghosts. I pictured my house. Quiet. Familiar. The chair I always sat in. The closet where my shoes were lined up by habit. "I'll come home," I said. "Just not right this minute." "Okay," she said, trying so hard to be brave. "Okay." Before she hung up, she added, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I let you stand there alone." That sentence hit me harder than the insult at the wedding. Because it was true. Not just tonight. For a long time. "I wasn't alone," I said softly. "I just looked like it." After we hung up, I sat there with my hands wrapped around the coffee cup. My fingers finally felt warm again. I thought about Richard Calloway, of all people, being the one to step in. A man who didn't owe me anything. Who barely knew me in any social sense. But he recognized danger because he'd seen it before. Recognized a pattern. Recognized the kind of paperwork that ruins lives quietly. And I thought about my own pattern. The quiet man. The steady man. The man who keeps receipts, keeps records, keeps his mouth shut because he thinks that's what adults do. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. What I knew for sure was this: dignity isn't something other people hand you. It's something you hold on to even when your hands are shaking. I paid my check and left a tip bigger than I normally would. Not because I was trying to buy kindness. Just because I felt grateful for the simple human act of being treated like I mattered, even if only for 5 minutes. On the drive home, the radio played an old song I hadn't heard in years. Something from the late 70s. A voice rasping about hard times and still getting up in the morning. I kept it low. I let the road do what it always does. Give you space to think. When I pulled into my driveway, the house was dark except for the porch light. Lauren always left it on when she wanted me to come back safe. I sat in the truck for a moment with the engine off, listening to the ticking of the cooling metal. I wasn't sure what the next day would bring. A fight, maybe. An apology. Maybe both. Maybe a long, slow rebuilding, the kind people don't post about online. But I knew one thing for certain. They called me nobody. And nobody was the only one who read the fine print. Ha ha ha, nobody. That word doesn't sting anymore. Not like it used to. If you've ever been made to feel invisible in your own home, if you've ever swallowed your pride just to keep the peace, please hear me. Peace that depends on your silence isn't peace at all. It's just quiet. Take care of yourself. Protect your name. Protect your money. Protect your dignity. And if this story hit close to home, share it with someone who might need the reminder. Subscribe if you want more true-to-life stories like this. Stories where quiet people finally get seen. Because we deserve to be seen. All of us.